Good day! I am Angelie Bagnol, and today we are going to tackle about intervening the language classroom, classroom management, interactions, and learning opportunities. So before we jump into our discussion proper, here are our learning objectives. Number 1 is to problematize notion of the good language teacher. Second is to examine differing patterns of classroom management and control. Third is to consider impact and role of new computer and web-based technologies and beyond to the English language teaching classroom. Lastly is to relate an ecological perspective on language teaching. So, what makes a good teacher? One of the aims of the teacher training and education is to challenge teachers to move beyond the limited and unanalyzed understandings of teaching. Most likely, surveys have collected characteristics of teachers that are more likely to lead to effective teaching. Here are the 9 key factors contributing to effective teaching by Roshine and First, 1973. First, it has the clarity of presentation, the enthusiasm of teacher, the variety of activities during lessons given by the teacher, the achievement-oriented behaviors in classrooms, opportunities to learn criterion materials and activities in doing activities or tests, acknowledge and stimulate student ideas, use of structuring comments at the beginning, and lastly, the guiding of student answers. But how should we determine these good teachers? Teachers do vary according to their personality and beliefs, cultural and contextual background, and reaches the aims and needs of learners. This profession is so diverse, thus modeling and characterizing a good teacher is kind of problematic. Further, we will examine how teachers might intervene and manage classroom's life and classroom interaction. Now, let's explore how this affects opportunities for learning our second language. In an English language teaching classroom, classroom management makes learning the most effective, especially the use of available time and resources. And it is because teachers also organize and direct the learners in the classroom. That's why how classrooms are managed affects opportunities for learning the second language. The elements of classroom interaction provides learning opportunities that teachers and learners can experience. Learning opportunities may result from conscious and imposed encounters with language, or maybe an unconscious consequence of nature use of language or natural use of language. According to Wright, the teachers who acknowledge the complexity inherent in classrooms and holds an opportunity view of classroom management can be exploited as learning opportunities. In the contrary, order view claims learning to be a consequence of teachers' control and the simplification of classrooms' complexity. Therefore, in an opportunity perspective of classroom management, learners may be encouraged to take risks with language and negotiate meanings in classroom discourse. Now, let's talk about the high and low structure in classroom decision-making by Briggs and Moore. Here we have the high structure classroom, which emphasizes the teacher's role in organizing learning with a little learner involvement in decision-making about lessons. Meanwhile, more opportunity-based low-structure approaches encourages learners' involvement in decisions about what and how to learn, as they adopt more autonomous approach in their own learning. Both approaches to the classroom management differs in the amount of control teacher and learners have over practices in classrooms. On high-structure opportunity classroom, the classroom discourse are more likely to be teacher-centered, while the low-structure opportunity classroom changes practices and behaviors of teachers and learners, which are alike. It also provides more opportunities for learners' participation and interaction, or what we call the learner-centered teaching. According to Rivers, he observed that the interaction is the key to teaching language for communication. He says that interaction makes students use all they possess of the language, where all they have learned can be expressed in real-life exchanges or discourse. The interaction continuum characterizes the tension between teacher-controlled and learner-managed classrooms. Instructional discourse, or the teacher-controlled. It is maintained via instructional discourse. Tasks are teacher-focused, and it involves the conveying and receiving of informations. Linguistic accuracy also in this discourse is important. On the other hand, the natural discourse is sustained through flexible learning. It is negotiated teachers and learners roles. So, teachers and learners can interact with each other, where learners' ideas are being shared and accepted in the discussion. The tasks are group-oriented and meaning-focused. The interaction itself is the focus of learning. So there might be the interaction between the teacher and the learner in a classroom. However, Crumb's model suggested that natural discourse creates or allows for more uncertainty in all aspects of classroom practice. As summarized in Table 2.2, classroom discourse and interactions is less predictable in more learner-centered and meaning-focused language classrooms. Now, let's move on to the teacher's decision-making, which answers the questions: making the right choice at the right time. The right choice at the right time will vary from context to context or classroom to classroom. Learner talk facilitates language learning or second language learning more effectively than teacher talk. Looking at the IRF exchange, or the initiation, response, and follow-up, there is an array of possible interaction-focused intervention open to teachers who have made an immediate decisions about what is appropriate when responding to an individual learner's contribution. And also the balanced competing forms of intervention that is almost every lesson they teach. Contrasting context for classroom decision-making from new technologies to large causes. English language teachings and learning, new technology, and large classes are both part of the landscape of language teaching worldwide. Therefore, it needs to be accommodated inclusively in our understanding of what language is, or language teaching is, and how it is lived out. The use of technology in the language teaching are used in many classrooms, as well as the potential of physical and temporal separation from learners or from each other and from the teacher. The applications of computers in language teaching and learning are the following: CAI, or what we call the computer-assisted instruction; TELL, or technology enhanced language learning; WELL stands for web enhanced language learning. That terms, which is now the most established terms, called CALL, or CALL, stands for Computer Assisted Language Learning by Gruba, and defined by Egbert as the learner's learning language in any context with, through, and around computer technologies. So this learning emerges when the technology has been advanced, especially nowadays. Next is the computer-mediated communication, or CMC. It is the control of some elements of the learning process, which are passed to the learners. And it also allows synchronous or real-time communication, or a synchronous or delayed communication. So, what makes a good teacher then? The answer is, it depends, because learners are not simply learners. Teachers are not simply teachers, and language classrooms are not all the same. Learning environments are complex systems built upon human relationship and located in specific real-world context. In order to understand precisely what takes place in our classrooms, we have to look at these classrooms as entities in their own right, exploring the meaning they have for those who are involved in them. According to the ecological perspective, they suggest that what happens in the English language teaching classrooms is not straightforward and predictable. It depends on who you are as a teacher. It depends on what you know and believe. It depends on what you want your students to be able to know and do, and it depends also on what you expected to teach and how you teach it. And the list of teaching and learning and the interaction between students and teachers goes on and on. Next is the language classrooms in theory and practice in complex, diverse, and local. Experience tells us that no two classrooms are the same. We shall examine these global and contextual differences. If we were to talk into two classrooms in the same institution with apparently comparable groups of learners with the teachers seemingly following a similar classroom methodology or similar book, why might the classes feel so different? There is variation between most similar teachers and group of learners. Metaphors for language teachers and teaching. Metaphors means any comparison which cannot be taken literally. A deviant or paradoxical use of language that is meaningful while being logically meaningless. For example, the term that we use in our daily definition when it comes to learning, which is the learning is a journey, which it says earlier that learning goes on and on, right? Teachers are guides, and that's correct, and that's the reality, but then it uses metaphors. Next is teaching is a two-way street, because you have to make to choose which decision would you want to choose as a teacher. So it uses metaphors too. Thus, metaphors can provide insights into a range of issues within English language teaching. When examining metaphors for teacher control and the wider purposes of education, identify molding, gatekeeping, gardening, and democratizing as key images representing the education to maintain the existing social order, for cultural transmission, for learner-centered growth, and for social reform, respectively. Dogma approaches to ELT aims to similarly unplug teachers and classrooms for a dependency on materials, teaching aids, and technology instead of drawing upon raw materials or content provided by the people in the room to produce learning opportunities via conversation-based interaction. So it is more on conversational interaction between the learner and the teacher in discussion in the classroom. Dogma or unplugged learning. It is interestingly both a way of teaching and an overt attitude to teaching, which Meddings and Thornbury argues it is a state of mind though. So teaching should be material, light, and conversation driven, with language said to emerge given the right classroom conditions. Images to the language classrooms. So let's look at the language classrooms. Second language classrooms has been conceptualized through a variety of metaphors. Each metaphor differs in the way that it is embodied or explains the classroom. Here, for example, we have the classroom as a control, a communication, a discourse. First is the classroom as socialization. It implies the classroom are placed where learners learn and norms and values of society at large to which they conform. Next is the classroom as discourse. It is the intimate surface text of the class and what teachers say and do during the lessons. Both example provides useful ways of thinking about language classrooms. Next is the classroom as an experimental laboratory. It implies the learners follow a clear set of pedagogical procedures under the guidance of the teacher. And the learner follows preset and expect patterns. The classroom as a culture and choral gardens. Their society metaphors reflects the social reality of language learning. It is experienced and created by teachers and learners. It means also that it recognizes the complexity of classroom setting itself and the connections between the classroom and its wider social context. Choral Garden suggests that learners and teachers both shape and are shaped by their classroom context. Learning opportunities are shaped by class participants in a dynamic process of personal engagement. And in every class has its own culture and generates knowledge. Green contends that language classrooms are interactive. Interactive in a way that interactions are ritual, predictable, and dynamic, and also it is diverse. Next, it is differentiated. Culture of classrooms differs from social realities. Next is collective. Classrooms are collective for it has classes that have psychological realities. Next is highly normative. Individuals conform to classroom norms to show where they belong. Next is asymmetrical. The duties, rights, and assumed knowledge of teachers and learners are different. Conservative. Classrooms are conservative in a way that classroom group seek social and emotional stability, thus this makes innovation difficult. Jointly constructed classrooms have the actual working out of the lesson in joint effort between the teacher and the learner. Next is the immediately significant. Classrooms are immediately significant in a way that what is done, how and why the classroom is psychologically significant to individuals and individuals as a group member. Classroom as culture and community of practice. Conceptualization emphasizes that classroom language learning is not only a pedagogic experience but is also a social encounter. The social pressures and teaching locally in the ELT classrooms. According to Allwright, the possibility of all conspiracy between teachers and their learners to give priority to social considerations, to pretend to each other is all must be well pedagogically if all is apparent well socially. Thus, teachers may behave in ways in which they have behaved in the past, or they make subtle adaptations to their tried and tested routines in response to new situations. In holistic approach, teachers and learners interact with each other within a classroom and its wider social context and instructional context. Thus, as already noted, the idea of classrooms as wholly independent entities is unrealistic, which means that all second language classrooms are inevitably subject to external influences. It is also both social and pedagogic in nature, where it is placed where the local and global comes together. Here we have the values in the English language teaching classroom. Values are both individual and social in that it is mediated through particular people who are subject to wrong social forces. It refers to that specific subset of a person's belief that focuses on what is right and wrong, rather than broader teacher theories. It also values permeate all aspects of English language teaching, including the curriculum design, language testing, which decisions of variety of English might be taught, and the role of the native speaker and non-native speaker teachers within the English language profession as a whole. So how do we put these values in practice as a teacher? or as a teacher educator. So, how do we put these values in practice? Even when morals are not being taught explicitly, schools and teachers are generally trying to do the right thing by their students. Thus, they have a moral life and may like it or not, we may be seen as exemplifying one. In short, teachers values as much as what they do and as much as what they say. Language teaching potentially provides learners with new ways of expressing who they are and even new identities. As Johnston argues, cultural values and related cultural practices may differ between native speakers, teacher, and English language learning. Whether teachers intend it or not, learners identify value-based messages that teachers impart. That's all for today. I hope you've learned something. Thank you.